Welcome one and all in this lecture series titled Struggle to Success Journeys in Law. And I am delighted to welcome His Lordship Justice S.J. Kathawalla in our midst. The Bombay Bar Association had started this lecture series primarily for junior members of the bar so that they could hear from stalwarts of our profession, esteemed jurists and judges about their journey in the profession, their trials and tribulation, their toil and grind in practice. For today's lecture, we are honored and privileged to have Justice Kathawalla, who has agreed to give a talk on the subject today and be here with us. May I request our President, Mr. Thakkar, to give his opening remarks.
Justice Kathawalla, Sri Venkatesh Don, Vice President of the Association, Sri Vishal Kanade, Secretary of the Association, Senior Advocates, and members of Bar, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to you all for the 8th lecture in the series Struggle to Success, Journey in Law. We are indeed thankful to Justice Kathawalla for having accepted our invitation to come and deliver this address today. We have started this lecture series where we have invited senior advocates and former judges of our High Court who have embarked on their journey in law without any family members in the profession or any godfather in profession. But due to their sheer hard work, they have succeeded in the profession in terms of their practice, their integrity and respect they command. We have amongst us Justice Kathawalla, with whose hard work as a judge we are all aware. Those of us who had seen him as a lawyer are also aware the crazy hours he had put in to make a name for himself in the profession. So without wasting any further time, may I request Justice Kathawalla to address us. Thank you.
Good evening, friends. I'm thankful to the Bombay Bar Association for inviting me in your midst to speak on Struggle to Success, Journeys in Law. There is no single person who has not faced struggles, and I am no exception. However, I will slightly modify the topic of today's talk to Struggle to Success, Journey in Life, including Law. Let me assert at the very outset that I have acceded to the request of sharing my life struggles, not with the intent of crying on one's shoulders or to gain sympathy, and neither it is my intent to blow my own trumpet. Hence, whatever I say today is with one singular desire of motivating anyone who could perhaps draw courage, inspiration, or even learn the lessons that my life struggle have taught me. Let me go back to 1956-57, when my parents, then young and unmarried, came from Surat to Mumbai with the intention of getting married and permanently settling down in Mumbai. They were accompanied by my maternal grandmother. Upon reaching Mumbai, they went straight to the house of my mother's cousin sister, who had a family of more than 7 members, occupying a space which hardly had measured 250 square feet, including the passage and a kitchen. My parents informed them that they intend to get married and settle in Mumbai and thus wanted a room to stay. My mother's cousin and her husband were shocked at the innocence of my parents' request, who expected a room immediately on arrival in Mumbai, more so in view of their very weak financial position. However, they suggested that my maternal grandmother could obtain a room in one of the Parsi widows' chawl, where she and my mother could stay, but my father would not be allowed to stay at nights and we would have to look out for some alternate accommodation. Thereafter, my mother and grandmother immediately shifted to a room in the Petit Widow's Chawl at Thakudwar. There were quite a few large-hearted and charitably disposed Parsis who would visit the widow's chawl and distribute food grains, dairy products, toiletries, and sometimes cash, which would normally range between a rupee or two, for which the widows would bless them abundantly. My parents used to tell me that there was an Irani restaurant on the ground floor next to the widow's chawl, where they would go with bread purchased from outside, order half a plate of keema, which would cost 4 annas, and all three of them would make a meal out of it. The waiter serving them, later realizing that they were short of money, arranged a little more keema for them than what the other customers were served. My parents thereafter started looking out for a roof by approaching various Parsi trusts. After a lot of effort, initially they were allowed by the N.M. Wadia Charities to share one room in a flat occupied by an old lady at Malcolm Bagh, Jogeshwari. By then my parents were married. My father, who was not very educated, got a job at a salary of rupees 90 with Godrej and Boyce in the worker category and continued to work in the same category till he retired. Though my parents were always grateful for the employment given to my father by Godrej, in view of the children they had, 3 children they had, it was difficult for them to even take care of the day-to-day expenses of the family on my father's salary. After the demise of the lady who had allowed my parents to stay in the one room in her tenanted flat at Malcolm Bagh, the trust allowed my parents, along with the children, to also use the second room, which was still her demise in her possession. However, my parents were now required to pay a rent of rupees 8 per month to the N.M. Wadia Charities, which they could not afford. They therefore made an application to the trust of N.M. Wadia Charities to give them a subsidy. The trustees gave them a subsidy of rupees 3 and asked them to pay rupees 5 per month towards rent. However, I would like to inform you that today I am the chairman of the very same N.M. Wadia Charities, having been offered the chair after my retirement as a judge of this court. I was in St. Xavier's School, Villeparle, where the fees in those days were rupees 5 for the 5th standard, rupees 6 for the 6th standard, rupees 7 for the 7th standard, and so on. It was impossible for my parents to pay even this amount, and therefore our fees, that is mine and my 2 sisters, were again paid by a charitable trust. My school timings were from 7:30 in the morning up to 1:30 in the afternoon. When I was in the 2nd or 3rd standard, my monthly fees were not paid despite warnings. One fine day, my class teacher asked me to leave the classroom and go home. I left the classroom but couldn't go home because I was hardly 9 years old and it was my mother who would bring me to school. from Jogeshwari and take me back. I therefore remained on the school premises for the next almost 6 hours until my mother came to fetch me at around 1:15 p.m. During recess, my classmates gathered around me and inquired why my fees were not paid. To save embarrassment, I informed them that maybe my parents had forgotten to pay my fees. Since the school had a Christian cemetery, I spent substantial time on that day following a funeral and wondered why there was a loud band leading the funeral procession, which I much later learned was a practice among some Catholics. I also had a very depressed feeling when I saw the family members of the deceased standing outside the cemetery in a queue, sobbing loudly. Even today, I can visualize that scene vividly as it is etched in my mind forever. Despite difficulties, my parents in my formative years would tell me that I should grow up and become a lawyer. I remember as a 7-year-old standing on stage and spiritedly participating in an elocution competition titled My Aim in Life. I had on that day confidently declared that my aim in life is to become a lawyer. From then on, not the slightest doubt crossed my mind, and never did I even briefly dwell on pursuing any other career, and my resolve of becoming a lawyer was absolutely resolute. I always wondered how I could help my parents by contributing towards the household expenses. I was waiting to turn 18 in order to take up a part-time job which would help me to contribute towards the sustenance of my family. One day I saw a boy sitting in the Jogeshwari market and selling rejects of Air India. He had some very attractive plastic items in bright colors with different emblems on the top. For example, the item on which India was written had a Natraj on the top, and the item on which France was written had Napoleon on the top. I mistook the same as bookmarks and purchased them by paying approximately 5 paise for each and started selling them in school for 20 paise each. I sold a substantial number of these items until one day my class teacher caught me doing this and reprimanded me for selling these items in school and also informed me that they were not bookmarks but were tea stirrers which were given to the passengers on flight. In Standard 9, during the summer vacation, I took a contract to get the electrical work done of an entire flat occupied by an old lady. I identified a good electrician, accompanied him to the market to purchase the electrical materials, supervised the work for days, and earned a princely amount of rupees 100. From the said amount, I purchased the first fan in the house for rupees 110, the balance being contributed by my parents. I passed my SSC exams and took admission in Wilson College in the arts stream. After the 11th standard final exams, I worked as a clerk in the Union Bank of India Pedder Road branch for a salary of rupees 300 per month. When I received a sum of rupees 900 after working for 3 months, I felt I was a rich man. Soon after the class 12 lectures commenced, I started giving tuitions. Initially, I had 2 tuitions at Paiduni, and my remuneration was rupees 100 per month per student for going and teaching them at their residence from Monday to Saturday. Gradually, the parents of my students started recommending me to other parents, and I had 4 tuitions per day, which I would attend after college. After my 12th standard board exams, I took up a job with the office of the Parsi Panchayat as a clerk, where my remuneration was again fixed at rupees 300 per month. Once my FY BA classes started, I informed the secretary of the trust that I would stop working and start attending my college. He suggested that I should work part-time with them, that is from 2:30 p.m. to 5:45 p.m., for which I will be paid rupees 150 per month. I accepted the offer and started working part-time with the trust office. I later had a financial rethink and found it more lucrative to give tuitions between 2:30 p.m. and 5:45 p.m., in which case I would earn rupees 300 instead of rupees 150 paid by the trust. Since the additional sum of rupees 50 would be of substantial help to me and my family, I left the job with the Parsi Panchayat and took up additional tuitions. All that I earned was handed over by me to my mother, who would give me a fixed sum per month out of the same, from which I would take care of my lunch as well as my day-to-day travel expenses. Initially, I did take my college fees from charitable trusts, but later stopped doing so and paid my fees from my own earnings. It was after I started earning whilst pursuing my college education that we could purchase the first refrigerator in the house and much later a television set. During this period, I was giving 6 tuitions per day after my college lectures and 2 additional tuitions on Thursdays and Sundays. Again, I would hand over the entire earnings to my mother for being used towards household expenses, and she would give me rupees 175 per month to spend towards my breakfast, lunch and travel expenses. However, there were days when, to satisfy my hunger pangs, I would also spend the only 40 paise retained by me for being used towards the bus fare, which was 20 paise for one way. The trouble would start thereafter because I would not have the money to travel and therefore had to walk from Grant Road to the residence of the students and again walk back to Grant Road station, that is an approximate distance of 10 kilometers, 2 ways. Whilst walking, I would sometimes regret using up that 40 paise with which I was supposed to buy my bus tickets. However, I never felt bitter or piteous towards my plight, but always had the courage and confidence to tell myself that my tomorrow would be better and brighter. After my graduation in Economics and Political Science from Wilson College, I joined the Government Law College. In Wilson College as well as in Government Law College, I was very active in student politics. Also, since I was responsible for convening various activities at GLC, one of my professors, Sri Kotak, being my well-wisher, took me aside and advised me to start working with some advocate instead of wasting my time in college. I told Professor Kotak that in fact I was looking for a job with an advocate, but no one was willing to pay me, and I desperately needed the money. Professor Kotak confessed that it was difficult to get an advocate who would both teach and pay me simultaneously. However, after a few days, Professor Kotak informed me that there was a very old firm whose 2 surviving partners, who were also very old, would pay me rupees 300 a month. I was very happy and immediately joined. However, to my dismay, in the initial 30 days that I worked there, I did not get an opportunity to go to any court except the Motor Accident Tribunal. I therefore did a rethink and decided to give tuitions from late evening onwards and work in a firm without remuneration, but where I would at least get an opportunity to deal with matters pertaining to different branches of law. Thereafter, I joined Messrs. Mullah and Mullah with a partner who was doing litigation work and who made it amply clear that I would not be paid a single rupee. I therefore requested that I be allowed to leave by 6:30 p.m. so that I could go and give tuitions, as I definitely needed to earn. appreciating my desire to learn and earn, the partner, late Soli Kolabawala, being God's good man, acceded to my request. I would work the whole day with the said partner and thereafter go and give tuitions to students at their respective residences and return home to Jogeshwari at almost 11 p.m. and again attend my first lecture at 7 a.m. at Government Law College. I worked at Mulla for 3 years when I was in Government Law College. I enjoyed every bit of the work because it helped me in learning the ropes. The advantage of working in a law firm when you are a student is that if your seniors feel that you are a hardworking and conscientious individual with average intelligence and with reasonably good common sense, which is not common, they will be the ones who will nurture you when you start your practice, more so if you are a first-generation lawyer like me. The main difficulty that I faced when I used to earn and learn was during the time of final exams, when sometimes the final exams of my tuition students would clash with my law exams. My first year law exams were for 6 consecutive days from 1st April to 10th April 1983, without a single break in between. The examinations of the students were up to 2nd or 3rd April, leaving hardly any time for me to study. I therefore went to the bookstall, purchased 3 test papers by Shah and Mehta, and cleared my exams. Also, since all the students would have exams at the same time, and I was required to devote more time to the students during exams, I would skip my lunch and in the lunch break, visit the residence of one of the students staying nearby. Once during my lunch break, I rushed to the house of a student near Banganga who was taking tuitions from me in only one subject. Whilst returning to Mulla, I was late and therefore in a great hurry. And bus number 103 or 107, I don't recollect very clearly, terminated just on the right side of the road, which we can see from here even today. Since the bus was stationary and I was in a hurry, I tried to cross the road to come towards this very building without checking if any traffic was coming from my right, when a scooter came and dashed against me and I fell on the road. The fall was bad, my spectacles were broken, my hand was injured and swollen, and my pant got torn from the side. With the assistance of passerby, and somehow managed to reach the office of Mullah, where I was asked to go home immediately. This was not possible, since I had to attend few other tuitions on that day. After receiving first aid, and tying the torn area of my pant with the red string used for tying cord briefs, I attended the tuitions. When at late evening I visited the house of a student, the mother of the student reprimanded me for being late. When I explained to her that I had met with an accident and my hand was swollen, which caused the delay in reaching their residence, she curtly told me that all that is not my lookout, and that since her children were having their exams, I ought to come on time. I must admit, this was the only time that I felt hurt, and the thought that passed my mind was that she is entitled to such behavior due to her financial standing in life, which was in no way comparable to mine. However, I also made a firm resolve on that day that no matter how high and far I rise in life, I would never be so insensitive to the trials and difficulties of human beings less fortunate than me. After I cleared my law examinations, I joined the chambers of Shri Rafiq Dada in October 1985. Initially, I faced immense problems because I never had a telephone in my house. 3 years prior thereto, since it was impossible to get a telephone connection under the regular category on payment of rupees 1,000, I had booked a phone under Own Your Telephone scheme by paying rupees 8,000, which too was installed much later. Initially, the work would come from my senior in Mulla Mulla or my friends working in Mulla Mulla and in other firms. The briefs would be for adjournments, directions, etc., for which I would charge rupees 45 and rupees 60 respectively. If I would not get a brief for a consecutive period of 3 to 4 days, I would feel insecure and start thinking as to what I would do if I didn't get sufficient matters. I would comfort myself with the idea of giving tuitions as an alternative to law. In the initial years of your practice, you are likely to face oppression and you may be taken advantage of not only by the advocates who brief you, but also by the managing clerks. During those days, after the next day's cause list would reach the office of an advocate or attorney, and if they had a matter where an adjournment was required to be taken or directions were to be obtained, they would send their clerk to the law library with instructions to hand over the brief to any junior sitting in the second floor library of this building after writing his or her name on the docket. Once when I marked the docket with a fee of 4 GMs, that is rupees 60, and returned the brief to the clerk after noting my fees told me that I should mark 10 GMs, that is rupees 150, and hand over rupees 90 to him. Apart from the fact that I did not want to give an impression to any advocate that I was overcharging, I was not wanting to play in the hands of any clerk and firmly turned down his suggestion. Thereafter, the same clerk would visit the library in the evenings to brief one of the junior lawyers sitting there, but never briefed me. I had no regrets about it. On every Thursday or Friday of the week, peons from different law firms would come to the law library with fee books and the counsel's name written on it. Checks along with the particulars of the matter in which the fees were being paid would accompany the fee book. On seeing the peon entering the library, I would wish and pray that he would be carrying a check for me, and I would also anxiously wait for him to come to the table where I would be sitting. Sometimes the prayers would be answered, and many a times not. Again, when I would be expecting a reasonable amount towards spending fees, that is at least in the range of rupees 300 to 450, I would get disappointed to receive a check of rupees 45. What I also observed was that after I would send my docket or memo to an advocate, there were some advocates who would send the fees on the very same day, some within a reasonable period, some would delay indefinitely and pay at their whim or that of their client, and some would not pay at all. What is the sense if a young lawyer, or for that matter any professional, who after doing the work is not paid his fees when he needs it the most? I am sure that the situation must have improved. My hard work started paying, and I continued to work harder. I also started receiving briefs in matters which were very urgent. That is, matters which required overnight drafting and moving the court the next morning. Since I lived in Jogeshwari, the attorney would book a hotel room for me in South Mumbai, where I would go through the papers, prepare a handwritten draft by 6 a.m. in the morning, when a representative of the attorney would collect the draft, get the papers ready, file them before 11 a.m., and the application would be made for urgent release by 11 a.m. In heavy matters, I have worked for days up to 2 or 3 a.m. and would again leave my house at 8 a.m. and be in chambers between 9 to 10 a.m. This is how I got used to doing hard work and more hard work. One of the joyous days of my life was when, as a consequence of my toil, I first paid income tax of more than rupees 1 crore. After the collegium decides to recommend an advocate's name for judgeship, a form is provided to the advocate for being filled up, which includes his or her income in the last 3 years. I remember after the form was filled up by me, in which I had set out my income for the last 5 years, one day I received a call from the office of the Chief Justice stating that the learned Chief Justice wanted to see me. When I met the Chief Justice, he asked me whether the figures I had provided in the income tax column were in lakhs or crores. When I humbly answered that it was in crores, he patted me on the shoulder and said, "How wrong human perception is when they say that only briefless lawyers become judges." Friends, the struggle that I have encountered as a student as well as a lawyer helped me to carry out my duties as a judge, sitting for long hours and attempting to deliver justice to as many people as I could. It also helped me to accept constructive criticism and improve upon my mistakes. The only message I would like to stress upon is that never get bogged down, depressed or dejected when problems stare you in the face. Deal with them boldly, without being bitter, disheartened, or without breaking down. Your mantra should be one, namely, that all days are not the same and your tomorrow will be bright and prosperous. I have never allowed myself to be embittered on account of the struggles faced by me. Instead, I am grateful to the Almighty for enabling me to successfully overcome the hurdles in my life and making me a strong human being who never bothered and will never bother about attacks and criticisms made with ulterior motives, and to make me realize that I am answerable to none save and except my conscience and the Lord above. Remember, as you become more and more successful, there will be some backbiting, nasty remarks, allegations, and criticism against you. At that time, you should not sulk or have a breakdown. You need to have a rhinoceros skin and tell yourself that such conduct shows that you are doing well, because people throw stones only at trees which bear fruits and not at a barren tree. May you all, my dear young friends, find success, happiness, and fulfillment in your own life's journey as I have in mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Kathawalla, for that very inspiring speech. May I request our Vice President, Mr. Dhond, to present a token of our affection to Justice Kathawalla. I would also like to thank Justice Kathawalla for having accepted our invitation and for being here with us today. I would also like to thank all our participants who are here in such large numbers. This concludes our function. Please join us for tea. Thank you.